What's up, Fuse? Welcome back to week 3 of Corona Cast. We're super excited to be back here with you guys. We're going to be continuing this Stay Humble mini-series that we were doing. We started last week talking about pride and humility, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about entitlement and all that jazz, and being like, yo, humble yourself.
That's right.
That's what I wanted to call this. I wanted to call it check yourself before you wreck yourself, but we said it was going to be too long, so we got Stay Humble. But you know,
by we, he means I came up with Stay Humble.
Right, so. It's true.
Anyway, moving right along.
All right, so Liz is going to be bringing us a little bit today where she's going to be talking about entitlement. So, ready, set,
entitlement.
Bring us down.
All right, so first, when you hear the word entitlement, your first thought might not be like pride necessarily.
Right.
Like you could be like, well, it's kind of a stretch, but really, if you break it down, it's basically a synonym for pride. Because the definition of entitlement is the belief that one is inherently deserving of privileges or special treatment.
Yeah.
That like, no matter what, like just because I am who I am and I do what I do, like I deserve X, Y, and Z. And so it's like, either I studied really hard, so I deserve a good grade, or I was really nice to this person, so I'm deserving of their love. And like we go all through this whole thing, and what ends up happening is we end up doing that with God as well, of like, well, I go to Fuse or I read my Bible, I deserve to get all the things that I want. Or I've stayed pure, I deserve to have a husband. Or I've worked really hard, God owes me a good job after I graduate because I went to Fuse and I was a greeter. And it's like we have this mindset of like, God owes me something because I've done something.
Right.
But the reality of it is like, God doesn't owe you anything. Like, he's actually already given you anything that you could ever need, like in the fact that he gave you salvation. And so the very paramount and foundational thing that we have to realize is that like, you aren't owed anything in this life. Like you actually, the only thing that you do deserve is hell, separation from God. And so in the fact that God has already made a way for you, God doesn't owe you anything else. And so for us to remember that and to be reminded that like, I don't have really a ground to stand on. I don't have any room to be prideful or to expect God to do things for me because he's already given everything to me. We see this in the most probably well-known verse of the Bible, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave. And so if we're supposed to be like God, it's not for God so loves me that I get, it's because for God so loved me, now I'm going to give too. And I'm going to live from this posture and position saying that like, I don't deserve anything other than what God's already given me. And I don't even deserve that, but because he's given it to me, I'm now going to live out of that expression. And I'm not going to live entitled, but I'm going to learn how to live like with God because he's given me so much.
Right. I think too, we all have that friend that as soon as you ask them for something, their immediate response, what's in it for me?
Yeah.
What do I get out of it?
Yeah.
And it's like, bro, you're my friend. Like, give me a ride to Chick-fil-A. Like, and it's like, but we all have these friends and we have these relationships where it is this, I give you this, so I expect this out of it. And yes, they're still our friends, but we don't go to that person very often whenever we have something that we might need or that we are just going to ask them for, because it's like, I know they're going to immediately flip it back to them. And they have almost this entitled mentality of, oh, if I give you something, I deserve something in return. But the best friends that we have are those that whenever you go to Chick-fil-A, it doesn't matter who pays, and you're not going to ask them for that money back because you know in 3 weeks, y'all going to Chick-fil-A again, and they're probably going to pick it up this time. And those are like the cool and close-knit relationships that we have because entitlement isn't getting in the way of that. It's not being this barrier between the two. And I think that's exactly what it does with Jesus. Is it puts this blockade between us and Jesus every time that we're like, oh, well, I've done these things. What have you done for me? And he, like he does to Job, goes, boy, sit down. I created the earth. I created the sea. What have you done?
Right, exactly.
Like, oh, I brought my Bible to church once. And he's like, cool, great. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
okay.
Let me know about that as I'm making the world spin
Exactly.
around. Yeah, and I think really the problem is, you know, we talk about entitlement with pride because it is this notion of like, you forget what God has actually done. And that's when you start operating out of that mindset of like, well, God hasn't done anything for me. Everything that I have is because I've worked hard, I've done good, I've made my way, I've climbed that ladder. Like everything that I have in my life is because I deserve it. But then it's like on the flip side of that, when you don't have anything in life, do you still view yourself as like, oh, it's because I deserve this. No, because then we change it of like,
Right.
why have you done this to me? Because I
Absolutely.
deserve to be on the top. I deserve to
completely
have the
flip it.
best. And so when we forget, again, it goes back to this whole fixing your focus. When we forget
Yeah.
who God is and what he's done, we become God. And we start to have this pride
Yes.
mentality like the enemy had, where he's like, equality with God is something to be grasped, and I'm going to go for it because
Right.
I deserve to be treated just as God. Like, I deserve to be a God, and so therefore I'm going to be God. And so how do we combat this like entitlement mindset? How do we kind of go through and navigate like, okay, we recognize entitlement is bad. It's this desire within me to think that I deserve something. So how do I kind of like break through this mindset? And I think the very first thing is to learn to be content.
Yeah.
To learn like, what do I actually have?
Yeah.
Instead of trying to say, well, what am I owed, or what do I deserve, or what can I get, or where should I be going? It's, let me stop and just look around and see what I actually have, and see what God has already done for me. And I think of the Israelites so much when I think about entitlement.
Yes.
Because all through Exodus, they're just complaining the whole time of like, God, why did you do this to me? Why did you do that? And it's like, bruh, you know he split the sea, right? You know he brought
Literally
you out
like 10 minutes ago.
before he even did that. He brought you out of
Right.
slavery. Then he did a miracle, and now he's taking you to a promised land.
Yes.
But somehow you still deserve something. But then we look at our lives and we do the same thing.
All
like
the time.
God has saved us from the slavery of sin. He has done miracles in our lives. He has made ways in our lives when there was no other way. And yet we're going towards a promised land, all the things that God has promised us. And yet we still look around and be like, bruh, but I don't have all this food. And it's like, bruh, man, I got delivered to you.
Yes.
Uber Eats came. The
Really.
very first Uber Eats
straight
from
up.
the sky. Okay?
OG.
So it's like, we just need to learn, like, what do I actually have? And if you look even through the Israelites' journey, they had God with them.
Yes.
They had God leading them by a pillar of cloud and by a pillar of fire. Like, God was in communion with them. God was leading them. God was doing miraculous things. And God was staying faithful to the promise that he made to them. And so when we get the opportunity to look at their story, and this is why we get so frustrated with them, because we see the whole story.
Yeah.
But it's us living our story. We don't see the whole story either. It's to be reminded, okay, what do I actually have? Not what am I lacking, but what do I actually have? And how can I be satisfied with all the things that God has given to me instead of lusting after the things that I don't yet have or may not actually ever get?
Yeah, I think too, entitlement tends to be something hard to talk about because we hear it and we immediately discount ourselves like, I'm not entitled, I'm fine.
Yep.
Which is almost the very definition of entitlement. Like, I don't need to hear this. I can tune out. It doesn't affect me at all. But the reality is, we all, to a certain degree, struggle with entitlement. I mean, heck, it was a couple weeks ago, we were going to a lunch and we were talking and I looked at myself and I was like, dang, that was entitlement. What just came out of my mouth was such entitlement.
Yeah.
And me feeling like this, I deserve this because for whatever reason, I might not be content in my situation.
Yeah.
And what was causing that discontentment is looking around at other people and looking at other people's stories.
Yep.
And that's exactly what the Israelites were doing. They were looking at all these other nations and all these other countries that were like, they're thriving. We just got kicked out of a country that was thriving. Well, first off, they were thriving because y'all were their slaves.
Right.
So, like, don't miss out on that
Right.
very important fact. But so many times they say, why did you bring us from here? Why did you bring us out of that? And it's like, y'all, he's trying to bring you into something that is promised and something that he is trying to show how faithful he is. But we get so discontented, like you've said.
Yeah.
And I think it's a huge part because we compare our stories to those who are around us rather than just going, all right, Lord, I'm going to trust that you've got my story planned.
Yep.
That you know exactly what you're going to go do with these things.
Yeah, and I think it's not only the comparison aspect, but it's also this, somehow we got it ingrained in our heads that as Christians, we're not going to struggle.
Right.
And so when anything becomes a challenge, we're like, but God, you owe me a good life because I follow you. God, I shouldn't have to be struggling with this. I shouldn't have to be struggling with my singleness. Or I shouldn't have to be struggling with getting the bad grade or not fitting in or doing. I shouldn't have to struggle with this because I'm choosing you. And God's like, no, in this world you will have troubles, but take heart because I'm with you in all of those. And again, it's being reminded, I'm with you. Be content with what you have.
Let me introduce you to my friend Paul.
Right.
And let's just look at his life real quick though. And like he wrote this, like he wrote half of this.
Yes.
And yet his life was hell. Like his life sucked.
Yeah.
And what we see over and over again from him is what you just said is that he fixed his focus. And he said, it's okay. Like I know God's got my story. We are still talking about him thousands of years later.
That's right.
If you think he thought we would be doing that while he's in jail, heck nah.
Yeah.
And there's no way he thought that whatever he was doing there was worth it in the least. And instead of turning to Jesus going like, well, screw this. I'm out of here. Like, I deserve to be free and all this stuff. He goes, all right, Lord, you're going to use this somehow. He had that trust level to it. His entitlement was so low in that, and his humility was so high throughout the entirety of it. And yeah, we do get this mentality that, oh, life's just going to be easy.
Yeah.
Or I'm entitled, or I deserve this easy life.
Yeah. We're really just setting ourselves up for failure at that point. And I think that is one of the things the enemy has done so well with, is making us think, oh, if you just become a Christian, everything's going to be easy, because he knows that when you become a Christian, everything gets harder. And so he's like trying to just manipulate us, and it's the freaking worst. He's the worst. He can go back to hell where he came from.
Straight up.
Anyway, so back to what we're saying. To fight entitlement, the first thing that I believe is that we have to learn to be content. The second thing that I think we need to learn to do is to learn to submit to God.
Yeah.
And so when we learn to die to ourselves, when we learn to pick up our cross and follow after God, we again realize, like, okay, I'm not entitled to anything. And honestly, we start to learn, we don't learn to necessarily submit to God first. Hear me out. We need to learn to submit to God first. But I think it comes when I'm content, I'm then able to submit to God in a more freer way and in a more real and intimate way than if I just tried to submit to God first and trying to be content. I think that you have to do it. So hear me out on that. Like, always submit to God. But I think there's a beauty in learning of, like, I do have everything that I need. And now that I recognize that, I'm able to more readily and more freely submit to who God is and all the things that he wants me to do. But it's so difficult, and so, like, again, it's countercultural, because I deserve this, I deserve this, I deserve this, I'm owed this. I'm inherently deserving of a privilege or a special treatment. And so we have to learn to be content, because when we learn to do that is when we actually learn how to submit to God.
Yeah, I agree. One of the biggest challenges when I meet with leaders and talk to them, that I'll issue them, is I go, okay, what's in your hand? What do you already have that's in your hands? What is already going on in your life? Who do you encounter regularly? Because so often we're looking for, well, I don't have a big enough platform, or I can't reach these people. I'm not friends with enough of these people. I don't know. I can't do blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, God's already given you a life. And so what are you doing with what's already in your hand? Do you recognize how overflowing your hands are, first off, and are you content in that? So it does start with, okay, let me see what's already in my hands, and how am I being content with what he's given me? Then how can I then open my hands and go, okay, God, like, I'm submitting this to you. And I think what's so important is, before we can even see what's in our hands, is we have to open them. And so often we're walking around like, this is mine. I own this. I deserve this. It's like, no, open your hands, see what's already there. And then submit to what he is saying, and taking that level. But start with where you are. Whenever you're questioning, what is God wanting for my life? What does he want me to do? Very often I ask, like, okay, what's in your hand? What are you good at? What do you like to do? And how can you submit those things to him, rather than looking around and asking, well, what about my story? What's going on here? Because like you said, we don't get to see the whole story. And it doesn't always make sense. And as you're talking, I'm reminded of, in the Old Testament, there's this story it's like 3 or 4 people and their families that kind of rise up against Moses while the Israelites are all out there. And they start to argue with him, and they're like, who put you in charge? What made you do this thing? Because they felt like they had just as much wisdom, just as much knowledge or right to be in charge of it. And Moses, as humbly as he can, goes, who are you to fight against God? Like, I did not put myself here. I fought. If you knew my story, you would know that I fought as hard as I could against this. And God persisted, and God put me here. And so who are you against God? And so they challenge him. They're like, prove it. And so Moses is like, all right, bet. Like, let's do this. And so Moses prays his prayer, like, if my leadership is of God, he will open the earth up and swallow you whole. What happens? The earth straight open up, them and their families and all their possessions sink down, and the earth close right back up on them again.
Bye-bye.
Deuces. And so it's like this moment of, they had this entitlement, and it shows us again how much God hates pride. And whenever we don't necessarily understand the whole story, because I have to relate to them on a human level. Of they saw this and they're like, I don't understand. I don't know what the whole story is, and I don't get it. But they responded in a way that wasn't good, in a way that wasn't healthy. And so they then had to suffer the consequences of that. And so oftentimes we don't understand, but we are called to submit. We are called to do that, to be content, and then to submit to what he has for us. And that's exactly what you said, how we help fight this entitlement.
Yeah. We don't have to understand, but we do have to submit. It really just leans into this idea that we have to let God be God and not let us be God.
Yep.
And that's so hard because that requires us to open our hands. That requires us to be vulnerable. That requires us to give. That requires us to do. And that requires us to not be entitled to some things and to really realize like, okay, God, I'm going to trust that you are a good God, that you only give good gifts, that you love us, and that nothing can separate us from that love. And so I'm going to trust you. I'm going to submit to that authority and say that, God, I don't understand what's going on in my life, but I recognize that I don't deserve anything. And so I'm going to live my life as a living sacrifice to you, and whatever you have, I'm going to trust that you're a good God because I'm going to let you be God in these situations. So I think about right now where we have seniors that are like, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to walk. Like, I don't know if I'm going to have my graduation. Like, I have worked so hard to walk in Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium with a purple purple cap and gown on. It's like, I don't know what I'm going to do in this situation. It's like, do you trust that God's got a great plan for you? Do you trust that if God has taken something away, it's because he's making room for something better?
Yeah.
And we can't see that right now, and that's why we have to lean into faith. I don't understand, but I'm going to submit anyway. And when we do that, it really does demolish pride. It demolishes entitlement, and it allows us to humbly walk as the people that God has called us to be.
Yeah. There's this story that I like to tell. I call it the red balloon theory. And whenever you're young, and if like imagine when you're a 5-year-old and someone gives you this red balloon, you love that thing, and you're obsessed with it, and you're holding on to it like it's life or death.
Yeah.
And we're 5-year-olds, and so what do? We let go of the thing, and it floats up away, and it's gone because again, child.
Yeah.
And so we look at it, and we're kind of devastated by that, and we are completely destroyed because this thing that was so important to us is gone now.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes we tend to hold on to things like a red balloon in the sense of our parents are there and they're watching like, why are you crying? I'll get you another red balloon. And so often Jesus is kind of doing this with us whenever we have hardship in our life and we have certain things that go on. He's like, but you don't know what's ahead. Whenever things don't make sense to us, he's saying, trust me. And oftentimes that red balloon is let go because we went to grab something else. Because there's also this, it's super cheesy, but there's this picture of a little kid holding a teddy bear, and the parent has this huge teddy bear behind them. They're like, just give me the small one. They're like, no, I can't let go of it. But we all have these red balloons or these teddy bears in our lives that we're like, no, I just want to hold on to this thing. And this thing means so much to me. And we can't negate how much it means to us because it doesn't, and that's very real. But we have to trust that God does have our best intention, that God is taking us to what he needs us to be in next, and that is going to be exactly where we need to go. Yeah.
When God's God, he works everything together for good. And so we just have to trust that, and we recognize that, you know, I love this whole mindset that we've been walking through of just stay humble, because it is so important that, like, I don't have anything to be too proud of. I'm not owed anything by God, and I can't just sit here and be super self-deprecating and just like pretend that I'm not anything good, because like we said last week, like people are looking to us to be different in this season. People are looking to us to react differently. People are looking to us to just be an example. And so I really am excited to just see how these conversations start to just unravel people's hearts a little bit and really have them look into like, where are some areas that I'm not allowing God to be God? Where are some areas that I'm not trusting or that I have my fist clenched too tightly? Where are some areas that I need to learn to submit? Like, how can I learn that I'm not supposed to be entitled? And so, okay, now that I recognize that, where do I feel entitled? And then how do I fight against that?
Yeah. And so like we've done each week, what are some practical ways that we can, throughout the week, just kind of take investment and figure out, all right, Lord, like how am I fighting entitlement, working through this? What are some things that we can do practically? Yeah.
So I think the first thing is take inventory. Like what Rob was talking about, where are your hands closed? What are you holding on to so tightly? What do you feel like you've been owed that you're not willing to give up because you earned that or you deserve that? And then once you realize what are the things that you're holding on to so tightly, let's ask the question like, okay, how can God be God in this situation? How can I open my hands in this season? And when there's a lot of uncertainty, when there's a lot of things that maybe we feel let down or unsure about, those are the times where we really need to let God speak into those. And so I would challenge you to get into a quiet place and allow God to speak into what am I holding on to? And then what are you going to do about it? I think so many times we think we have to have this like eloquent talk with God, and it's like, no, just be real with him. If you're frustrated about something or you feel like he does owe you something, take that to him. He's not scared of your emotion.
Right.
He's not scared of your rawness and your realness. Be honest with God and say, you know what, God, there has been times where I feel like you owed me this, or I feel let down because you didn't do this in my life. Speak into this for me, because I want you to speak into it. Because if we don't give God an opportunity to speak into it, we'll write our own story.
Yeah.
And that just feeds that entitlement mentality over and over again. So take inventory of what you're holding on to, and then ask God the question, okay, God, how can you be God in this situation?
Yeah, I think it's so good. And it's asking ourselves, like, do I know my place? Not in a mean way, but do I actually, am I taking stock of my role in this situation or where I am? Like, if I'm at a friend's house, am I just busting in the cupboard and eating the cookies?
Yeah.
Or am I going, hey, could I grab some cookies out of the cupboard first?
Right.
But we do that with Jesus sometimes. We go, no, this is what I deserve, so I'm going to go ahead and take it. And so asking ourselves, do I know my place in this? Do I know my role, or am I trying to be God?
Yeah.
Am I trying to be the fixer in all my relationships? Am I trying to be someone that I'm not necessarily called to be in this moment?
Yeah.
And so asking ourselves, what is my role? And then I think the other thing is asking of, well, what do I really deserve? Because entitlement is at the root, looking at it and saying, I deserve these things, but asking, no, what do you really deserve in its entirety? Because if we're honest, we deserve hell.
Yeah.
Like, that's actually what we deserve.
Yeah.
But instead, Jesus came and he said, no, I'm going to give you life. I'm going to give you heaven.
Yeah.
And so we should be having such a grateful mentality towards things whenever we actually do a self-assessment of going, wait, if I look at my whole life, not just one little aspect, this part over there, but my whole, what do I deserve?
Yeah.
And we take stock of it, we realize how broken we are and how humbling of a moment that is. And so I think this week it's taking that inventory. Asking the Lord, all right, how can you please partner with me as I work through this entitlement? What role do I actually play in this? And asking, what do I really deserve throughout this? As we go about this week, checking in with yourself. What do I deserve in this moment? What does God say that I actually deserve? And then what has he really given me in all those things?
And I think it's a fair enough statement to say that these are a lot of heavy things that we've been talking about. And so as we've said each time, like, include us in the conversation.
Please.
Allow us to speak into some things. Hit us up, whether it's on social media, text us, call us, however we can walk with you in this, we would love to, because we recognize pride and entitlement and humility. These are things that have been wired in us for years and years. And so for us to just have a casual conversation about uproot these things, we recognize it's not that easy. And this is going to be a process. And so let us be a part of the journey. And as always, let us know how God is working in your life. How can we be praying with you? How can we be walking alongside you? And just let us know all the things that God is doing.
Yeah, we're taking deep dives into hard subjects. So please reach out with questions. Let us know, and we're here for it. We're here to kind of journey with you through this time. We've not left. We're still here. And so we're really excited to get to do this. Fuse, we love you all so much, and we can't wait until we get to be together again. But for now, we're pumped that we get to do this. We'll see you guys next week.
See you.